they will have.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. The panel is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, U.S. Army, retired, AFCEA's President and Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you very much, Ben. Everybody grab a seat. We got plenty of room here. Welcome to our what we saved as our best and last panel for you this afternoon. So thank you for being here. I hope you've had an amazing week here at San Diego. We just did a count, and normally I talk about how many people we've registered at this event, which we exceeded 12,000. But the impressive number is we actually printed 10,400 badges. So 10,400 of your closest friends are here with you. So thank you so much to industry, to our partners here in San Diego, and all that have flown in for this event. So welcome to what is being done to strengthen and secure sea service capabilities that pace the threat. It is my pleasure to introduce this morning's panel. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank McKinsey & Company and their sponsorship of the panel. They are represented this afternoon by Bob Sharp, Senior Advisor. Sir.
Thank you, General Lawrence, and welcome everybody. It is great to see these smiling, alert faces on day 3 for what I agree is probably going to be the best panel, no pressure, right? But I am retired Vice Admiral Bob Sharp. I'm here as a senior advisor with McKinsey & Company. You will see distributed around here a little bit about the company. The company has had about 24 individuals here all week, engaged in all the, listening to the speakers, meeting with individuals, and the feedback I had from those 24 or so individuals was this was one of the most valuable times they've spent at an event like this. And instead of talking about McKinsey, they asked that I just take this opportunity to thank people. So on behalf of McKinsey, we want to thank Naval Institute, AFCEA, for pulling this all together. We want to thank all the people like dressed in black with badges that are around here that are making things run so smoothly. Please take time to shake their hands for us, because they make it look easy. It's not. We want to thank all the seniors who have dedicated time and energy to come in here, either as speakers or panel members, to help us all understand what those challenges are. And if you're feeling left out, don't, because my last thanks is to everybody else, right? Everybody who has been here listening, learning, having important conversations. Conversations that need to not end here, but to continue, right? So that we can help them provide those capabilities that our warfighters need to get the job done. Capabilities that they've been talking about, such as long-range fires, non-traditional sea denial, counter C5ISR, terminal defense, contested logistics. Capabilities they need so that we can train, communicate, outthink our competitors in a very complex environment. Those of you who were able to listen to Vice Admiral Brad Cooper this morning should be pretty excited and a little frightened, right? Because we were talking about this. What he described is what we are facing, and just a fraction of what we're really facing when you look at the magnitude, the speed, the complexity of what we might be facing in the Western Pacific. So we thank you for not only what you're doing here, we thank you for what we collectively need to do in the future. And I will turn it back over to General Lawrence to introduce this illustrious panel members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob, for that recap there. We appreciate it. I now have the distinct pleasure of introducing our moderator for the panel, the Honorable Sean Stackley, former Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. Honorable Stackley began his naval career as a surface warfare officer upon graduation from the Naval Academy in 1979 and retired in 2005 with the rank of captain, serving as the Navy's LPD-17 program manager, with responsibility for all aspects of procurement for this major ship program. Prior to his appointment as Assistant Secretary of the Navy for RD&A, he served as a professional staff member of the Senate Committee on the Armed Services, where he was responsible for overseeing Navy and Marine Corps programs, U.S. Transcom matters, and replaced policy for the Sea Power Subcommittee. He also advised on Navy and Marine Corps operations and maintenance, science and technologies, and acquisition policy. Honorable Stackley was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition in July of 2008 and held that position until August of 2017. He was also the Acting Secretary of the Navy from January to August of 2017. Sir, thank you and all your panelists for joining us today. We look forward to your presentation, sir.
All right, well, thank you. And let me start by congratulating USNI and AFC on just a superb lineup of speakers, Navy, Marine Corps, the Hill, industry, our allies. But what's more impressive, incredibly impressive, is how truly aligned the leadership is across the board with regards to the challenges before our Navy Marine Corps and what's needed to be done to tackle those challenges. You know, I'm impressed that everyone in the Marine Corps knows their role inside of the Commandant's Force Design, and everybody in the Navy knows their role inside the CNO's NAV plan. The Davidson window has been reduced down to a date, a single date, January the 1st, 2027. And that focuses everybody on the immediacy of the challenges before us. That's, you know, I think Brad Skillman mentioned it yesterday. It's 700 days from today. Count it. That's 100 weeks to be prepared for potential conflict with China. Now, the resounding message throughout the week, and it was absolutely foot-stomped this morning by just a great set of remarks and the picture that Vice Admiral Cooper painted in this morning's Keystone. First, it's urgency, absolute urgency, from requirements to budgeting to acquisition to execution. We have to get everyone on a wartime footing. Then it's innovation. The character of war is changing real time. So we need to unleash the vast technical resources that America has to offer to be able to stay ahead of the threat in real time. Then there's speed. Moore's Law is alive and well. So if it takes us 5 years to develop a system, 10 years to field it, the only thing we know for sure is it's obsolete long before it's fully operationally capable. We've got to figure out a way to pick up the speed. And then scale, from ships to aircraft to weapon systems. In the CNO's words, we need to get more players, more ready players on the field. Then partnership. Leveraging the partnerships between government and industry and the U.S. and our allies is perhaps our secret weapon. It's our discriminating capability when we think about a numerically superior China. And lastly, accountability. Simply put, we need to deliver on our promises. We need to deliver on the commitments that we're making across government and industry. Now, to help address those needs, I'm very pleased to be joined today by the commanders of the Navy and Marine Corps Systems Commands. Starting to my left here, Vice Admiral Carl Chebby, Admiral Chebby from Commander Naval Air Systems Command, Mr. Steve Baldwin, who's PEO Land Systems representing MARCOR SysComs today, Rear Admiral Seiko Okano, the commanding officer of NAVWAR SysCom, and then at the far left here, Mr. Chris Miller, the executive director at the Naval Sea Systems Command. They're responsible for the maintenance, modernization of the ships, aircraft, and weapons systems of the fleet underway today. But they also provide the technical, contracts, finance, and logistics muscles to the program executive offices that are building the future fleet, and then they drive the labs, warfare centers, and field activities that are working side by side with our warfighters to unlock the solutions to the technical challenges that the warfighter is dealing with today. Between them, they bring about a century and a half of operational, technical, and program experience to the task. They understand the warfighter. They understand our Byzantine acquisition system. They understand industry. They're passionate about their mission and are uniquely qualified to tackle the challenges between acquisition and acquisition leadership. So I'll kick this panel off with a few questions, and I ask that the audience prepare your questions, and then we'll ensure there's time for you to step up to a mic and impose your challenges to the panel here today. So let me start. I'm going to start with a broad question. It might seem like a softball, but I think it'll get at the crux. Each of these SysCom commanders sits atop a large organization with incredibly broad responsibility. So I'd like to ask you, going in turn here, to take a few minutes to outline what your challenges are, your top 3 to 4 challenges, and then given the critical need for urgency, innovation, and speed, describe how the systems commands are tackling these priorities on a wartime footing. Give crisp examples of how the SysComs are changing the way you do business to deliver to the warfighter in a faster timeline. So Carl, let's start with you.
Sir, thank you. Can you guys hear me? I have the good fortune of living in the Mattapanai Manor. It's a 300-year-old historic home in Patuxent River. It's beautiful. But it's an echo chamber, kind of like this audio. I mean, this forum is right here. So if you guys can't hear us, please kind of speak up. When Maggie calls me across the house, I have to ask her what room she's in and what floor she's on. So it's difficult for me to hear other people talking, even when Secretary Stackley was talking. So if you have questions or if I'm not clear, please chime in here. Hey, in 2017, I got a phone call from Secretary Stackley. Chebs, as a new flag officer, we have selected you to come out to be PEO C4I. You are the right person at the right time to go lead that organization. I was an aviator with absolutely zero domain expertise in what C4I did. I learned so much coming out here, and I value, and it's great to see so many teammates out here in SACO. You and your team out here at NAVWAR and PEO C4I doing a phenomenal job. And this is the domain we're going to fight in for the next fight. So it's critically important we continue to focus on this domain. I learned a lot coming out here. Zero domain expertise. How do I kind of move the organization forward from a C4I perspective? I've captured some of those lessons learned. If you look at what we do from NAVAIR and selecting our next PMs, I focus on 3 things, and this is in the precept. I focus on leadership. Can the person we're selecting going to lead this organization and drive this organization? Diversity of experience. Do we have folks with a breadth of experience from multiple different organizations to push this organization forward? And then acquisition experience. So we're an acquisition community, and my 3rd priority is acquisition, leadership and diversity experience. The successes that we've had across NAVAIR, across availability, affordability, and we're getting after capability, safety, and training, have been driven by a couple things. We've had a demanding and unapologetic customer, the Air Boss. We've had a PMD, Principal Military Deputy for ASNRDA, that has been a key enabling arm so that I can go across lanes to drive the NAVAIR organization so we can achieve the outcomes across availability, affordability, capability, safety, and training. I'm going to stop right there. I look forward to your questions.
Steve.
Thank you. Everybody can hear me okay? Great. So I'm representing not only myself as a PEO, but also Brigadier General Campbell, who could not be here today, fairly new SysCom commander there. So I'll outline what her priorities are. I obviously share in them because the benefits that derive from her executing those priorities accrue to our programs in PO land systems. So first and foremost, just to echo Admiral Chebby, talent management and people, you often hear leaders say that, and it's not just lip service here at Marcorps SysCom. We are only successful in our programs and capabilities if we are also successful in attracting, curating, retaining, if you will. I don't like that word. I like the word curating better. A highly effective and collaborative workforce who not only are critical thinkers, but are critical doers. And so what we really try to establish together is how to maximize the maximum human capital we can from them. What are the talents and treasures they bring? How can we make sure we're focused them on capability delivery? And especially building in agility and resiliency, as Secretary Stackley outlined, urgency, innovation, speed. I mean, agility is really the way to get after a lot of that. Secondly, partnerships. The people and the partnerships. So it's not just like international partnerships, it's that very close collaboration with industry, with warfare centers. The Marine Corps does not have its own warfare center. We have a science, technology, and research lab up at Camp Pendleton, very small but critical outfit, but we leverage very heavily the Navy Research and Development Enterprise and all of the warfare labs. We've got a significant amount of business in all of those. So international partnerships are incredibly important too. We would not be fielding or likely fielding the medium-range intercept capability, which is a combination of an Israeli Iron Dome missile, one of the most fired missiles, air defense missiles in the world, with our ground air task coordinator radar, with our equivalent of CEC, and with using a HIMARS trailer that we've adapted. So we can't do that without those great and close partnerships. And finally, a real emphasis on programs. And we get to program success when we've got the right people on the right teams doing the right work, and they're able to collaborate and innovate with all that great partnership ecosystem there. A great example, again, of where all this came together very recently, if you attended the General Austin and Admiral Pitts panel yesterday, General Austin talked about dismounted counter-UAS. That was a discussion that started in like July and August. We did a whole rodeo, what we call a rodeo, out of 29 Palms with dozens of industry vendors. And when we select, which will be very soon, those solutions, within 6-7 weeks, they're going to get fielded out to the FMF. And that's going to be a continuous and iterative loop. So we can get after the urgency, the innovation, the speed. We've got the right team to do that. Scale is the biggest challenge, to do that across multiple programs.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. So I come from a fires background, combat systems, pretty much my entire life. I think I qualified at SPAWAR a while ago. So it's interesting that a fires person is in charge of IW, and I see my predecessor, Doug Small, in the room. He came from combat systems too. I think what you're seeing is, and Mr. Stackley kind of mentioned it in his opening, this kind of significant shift right now in how we fight, in just our approach to warfare. We're a lot more interconnected. We're a lot more integrated. And I think all of those domains that we traditionally operate in are blurring. Those lines are blurring. And you're finding this to be a lot more multi-domain, multi-spectral approach to warfare. At NAVWAR, we're kind of in the center of it because we have the privilege of delivering that kind of decisive information advantage to the leaders. So this is going to require a different approach completely. You kind of heard it mentioned before, but it's got to be an emphasis on speed. It's got to be an emphasis on agility. It's got to be an emphasis, on adaptability. And what are these things? And how do you get 12,000 people to do that overnight? Is a challenge. How do you instill this culture where you say, hey, everything that you've learned to date isn't going to work. You got to look at this completely different. Everything from contracts to readiness, and everything in between. Everything is too slow. And breaking down all of those. And by the way, you can't play in your swim lane anymore. I know you say swim lanes are for losers, but it's true. These silos, we're in silos, and the silos are collapsing on us very, very quickly. And so building up those relationships and leading that effort is, I would say, our number one challenge. And that starts with connecting the workforce with the mission. That starts with telling the workforce, hey, this is what we've got to do. We've got to do it in a different way, and I know that they're going to come up with innovative ways to do it. But I would say that the priorities that I have is really how do you become more agile and adaptable at speed, at the pace that we need it to be, and how do you do, to include adoption of AI and all those things very, very quickly.
Thank you. Chris, before you go, Ray, was Vice Admiral Cooper's talk this morning videotaped? I think that's by itself a tremendous training film for the 12,000, the 34,000, the 16,000 across the, that SysCom command, so people understand their connection, the difference that they make to the warfighter real time.
That's right.
This is not something that waits until Monday when you go home on Friday. It's something you have to address now.
Right.
Action? Chris?
All right, hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Miller. I'm actually representing Admiral Downey, but I'm not going to deny I'm glad to be here. I spent over 10 years of my career in San Diego working at NAVWAR, was SPAWAR, now NAVWAR, and so I kind of grew up here, but I also had the pleasure, honor, challenge of working for Secretary Stackley along his entire time in the building, I think, and he's to blame for probably me being here today. And so those of you who look at my bio, you will realize I'm a different kind of person at NAVC. I never worked at NAVC until I became the executive director. What I bring, though, is a background of change, of execution, of getting organizations moving. And so I'm really excited to be here. What I will say is my impression after being here is there's never been clear alignment about what our mission is in the near term. The CNO's NAV plan is crystal clear. 2027, 80% combat surge ready. We have to be able for that enduring, sustained fight. And so we are all aligned right now like I've never been. That's not to say we got this figured out, but I would say we are more aligned than we've ever been for what we have to do. And it's 701 days. CNO has a countdown clock in her office. We routinely talk about it in our organization about what is the count today, because that is the alignment that we're looking for. And when you think about NAVC and you think about what we're really trying to do, it is about making that fleet available. And you get there through one of two ways. We either deliver new ships or you make the ships we have ready, make sure they're available, and you get them out of maintenance on time. And that's what we're focused on. But I got to give you a little bit of data just so you understand the problem that we're in as a nation. In the 1980s, when we're really good at some of these things, when you think about when we're delivering more ships than ever, almost 35% of our workforce was in manufacturing. Today, it's 12%. I was at a shipyard yesterday. I asked what the starting salary was for one of their workers. $22 an hour. What do you make it in and out today? It's $22 an hour, starting pay. That's a real challenge for us. We've also closed a number of shipyards. On the public shipyards, we went from 8 to 4. 2 of those were nuclear shipyards, which did work on our nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers. Private shipyards went from 3 to 2. We have lost a significant amount of our industrial base that we have got to grow back. And that is just, it's bigger than us, right? This is a national issue. And so you'll hear me talk about, some other stats in a second, but the reality is we've got to get our national manufacturing and our industrial base back to where it needs to be. Because if we don't have that industrial base, no matter what we do to buying ships and putting them on contract, we're not going to get better. And let's just talk about suppliers. In the nuclear world, we went from over 17,000 suppliers to less than 5,000. Those are just the kind of challenges that we're all dealing with, and that is why when you hear us talk more and more, it's about what do we do together? Because I have to get new players on the field from an acquisition perspective, and I have to get more folks engaged. As far as our priorities, bring up the slide, what I will tell you is there's 5 things we're trying to do very rapidly. The first thing is accelerate force generation. That means get ships built and delivered on time, if not faster. It also means getting better at what we do in our combat systems world. Admiral Cooper's talks is great. It gives you a sense of what we're trying to do. We are trying to go from taking months or years to fielding things to days. And there's some phenomenal work that's happened there. The second piece is about readiness generation. We've got to meet the CNO's intent of combat surge ready that varies by different type of platform, but we are aggressively working and pulling all kinds of levers and applying GRGB principles and P2Ps to figure out how we move the needle in readiness. We see signs, and I'll get some of those in a second. The third piece is about data, and this is where I need help. NAVSEA generates a lot of data. Some of it's not good data, some of it's dirty data, but I have lots of data. We have got to get better about how do we mine that data, use that data to improve things as simple as sequencing of work in our public shipyards, or how to learn how to do contracts faster. Why we don't use a large language model right now to write contracts, I don't know. But there's opportunities in the data space for us to all get faster. And then a fourth piece is about our team, and I could spend a lot of time talking about this, but you already heard some of the stats. We've got to figure out how we keep that world-class team of engineers, program managers, contracts people, because the workload's increasing. And then the last piece is about the foundation. The only thing older than some of our aircraft carriers are our public dry docks. And so we have a program in SIOP that is getting after that recapitalization, that modernization. We have got to stay committed to that because the infrastructure has got to be ready to support the work, whether that's building ships, repairing ships, and making sure that our people can work in good environments and can stay productive. So what's the good news right now? The good news is in this last fiscal year, we actually delivered 12 ships on new construction, the most we've seen in a long time. And that's a great story, but it's not nearly enough, and we got to keep pushing on that. We completed 44 C&O availabilities last year, 65% on time of our C&O availabilities last year, which is up from 40% in 2023. Things are moving the right way. It's a ton of work, but we got to keep getting better at there. And reducing days of maintenance delay. Almost 1,000 hours of days of maintenance delay were reduced last year because we're starting to really focus on it. Here's the other one I'll just kind of lay out there. Right now, we have 93 ships on contract. Probably the highest it's ever been. An amazing job by lots of people from the Hill to OpNav to the acquisition community to get us 93 ships on contract. 56 of those are under construction right now. Think about what that backlog looks like at all of our yards. We have got to figure out how do we get after that backlog, accelerate what we're doing so we can start to deliver those ships. So what's my message to my workforce? The first thing is we have to question everything we do. I don't care how simple the process is or how hard the process is or where it came from. We have to have a questioning mindset and get after what we're doing. If Elon Musk were up here, he would say, stop doing stupid. We got to have the same mindset about what do we do to make sure we're actually focused on the most important things. The second thing is we have to start thinking, acting, and operating differently. That means we got to learn from parts of our organization that we probably weren't comfortable talking to. We got to work across organizations. We have to think about how do we employ technology. I love our RMCs and our shipyards, but it's like walking back in time sometimes. We've got tools and components there from World War II, whereas if I were to go to a new manufacturing plant like Boeing or one of these other big companies, it would be like a world-class organization. We have to start thinking about how to apply technology in the additive manufacturing space, other kinds of advanced manufacturing, because that's what it's going to take to unleash the opportunity here. And finally, it is about our people. Shipbuilding is a people business, and we need help, right? I talked about the salary piece, but it's bigger than just salary. It's about healthcare. It's about making sure they have benefits, making sure that they have a good working environment. We can't solve that by ourselves. I need everybody helping us figure out how to rebuild that part of our economy. My final message to all of you is we're all in this together, right? There is no magical wall between us. You know, I think Admiral Greenert once said, we're in a marriage with no hope of a divorce. So between all of us, we have to come together to figure out how to get us back where we need to be. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take dedication. It's going to be hard, but hard is authorized. We need to figure out how to rally and come together to get that manufacturing part of our economy going and help our shipbuilding programs, as well as actually the rest of our organization, because I could also tell you what's happening in shipbuilding, it's happening in the weapons world, and it's happening in other parts of our defense industrial base, so we need help. My final thing for all of you is I don't go anywhere without quoting Talladega Nights. Ricky Bobby says, if you're not first, you're last. We need to be first in this fight. We need to be first in this race, and we all need to come together and figure out how to help each other. So thank you all, and I look forward to the questions.
You have got to love Chris's passion. He's the exact right guy at the right time for the job he's in, and I can assure you he is looking forward to your questions. Now, Chris, you touched on the 80% surge-capable force. You touched on NAVC, 65% on-time, up to 65% on-time availabilities today. Where do you need to be to hit the 80% surge-capable benchmark?
We need to be much higher, sir. I would give you one of the things we've been looking at is how can I learn from industry? And my best case here is Carnival. Carnival's in the high 90s. They almost never meet one of their avails. And most of their avails are less than 30 days. And so we have got to get to that same place. 65% is not good enough. We need to be in the high 90s. We need to be much more predictable, but we also got to figure out how I can start to pull some of those avails left to make them shorter. But that's the kind of learning I'm after. If you have experiences, you have ideas, you have thoughts, come see us, because we don't have it all figured out, but I know some of you have some great ideas.
Okay, so that's the ship side. Carl, maybe you can give us an update on the aviation side in terms of readiness and hitting the CNO's goal by January 27.
First, it's great to be the NAV Air Commander, not the NAV Sea Commander. They got a lot of challenges. But what Chris just finished up with is a key aspect. Our readiness levels across naval aviation have never been higher in the history of naval aviation. We're at 90% of our target. But if I wind the clock back 5 or 6 years, we had very poor readiness. We were war fighters. We know our business. We didn't want to go out to industry to figure out what best in class looked like. We're not an airline. Don't tell us how to run an airline. And until we had SecNav come down and kind of dictate, you shall, we would not have changed. We have changed. We understand our business. We have clear defined goals decomposed all the way down to the supported commanders, the program manager and the TICOM leads. We take time to baseline our current performance with data. No more storytelling. What is the data telling us? Why are we where we are right now? What is the gap between where we are and where we need to be, our targets? What is the plan? What are the metrics we're going to track? And then once a month, and this is key, we get together at a pretty high level, at the 3-star level, with all the stakeholders, industry partners included. And it's uncomfortable conversations, but it's the necessary conversations. If we're off plan, why are we off plan? What do we need to do to get back on plan? The folks that have been very successful with this are unabashedly and unafraid to task leadership, myself, Airboss, and a lot of other senior stakeholders of the help that they need. And they get the help and we remove barriers. That formula, it's so simple. North Stars, baseline yourself, put plans in place with metrics, track your performance to plan, elevate barriers. It's every time we introduce this subject, this concept to a new PM, new PEO, new SysCom, the first response you can imagine is, we know our business. We're different, we're unique, so it has worked. We learned on F-18, we've scaled it to all of our TMSs. So the 80% combat surge ready, I have no issues at all with that. From a mission capable perspective, we're going after full mission capable as well. As I scale it to our other North Stars across NavAir, across capability, affordability, availability, safety, and training, we're taking the same playbook. How do I leverage and scale the learning we had on availability to affordability? We've taken $2 billion out of the system, we're running a better business, and reinvested into naval aviation. How do I take those same concepts with North Stars for capability delivery and work the problem right to left? Make sure all the stakeholders are in the room for these discussions, make sure we're leveraging the data, make sure we have P2Ps, and we're holding ourselves accountable to outcomes. Again, a key aspect of our success has been industry engagement and participation in those forums for us to drive the outcomes that we need across naval aviation.
Thanks, Carl. We're going to quickly shift. Seiko, I've got a question for you. This morning, Vice Admiral Cooper trumpeted JADC2 in terms of the contribution it's making to the combat action in the Red Sea. So when it comes to potential China fight, JADC2 is truly a discriminating capability that our forces are going to be relying upon. Can you provide an update in terms of your role, Project Overmatch, in delivering that capability to the fleet today, and increasingly so as we march forward?
Yeah, so Overmatch is really empowered with connecting the entire fleet. And the first thing, before you can even get to, the JADC2, which are the tools, right? You have to connect the entire, not just fleet naval force, everything from aviation to subsurface to hybrid to, unmanned, the joint force, allies and partners. And so that's huge. Not just connecting, but connecting the fleet in a way that it's resilient, so that it can operate in whatever was necessary. So that's step one. The second thing is do you have the right site picture? Do you have the right information tools? Do you have the right battle space awareness? Do you have all of those things that allows you, the decision makers, and I think Admiral Cooper was talking from being a decision maker, to make those decisions at his level, right? Because you need insight into that. And that's that second piece that we've been working really hard on. As I mentioned, how we fight is completely different, and those silos are really blurred right now, as far as data sharing. So how do we share data across those domains? I think that's the work we're doing, and not just that, but it's the sets and reps. And this isn't something that you just deliver to the warfighter and you're like, have fun. So this is really getting this into, and you're starting to see this overmatch capability get into the carrier strike groups. You're starting to see this, the capability get into the ARGs, and also into unmanned. And so, again, now we're getting a lot of feedback, and that feedback is something that we're going to take it. We're taking in. We're making changes and corrections as fast as we can, getting that back out, so that we do reps and sets before 2027.
Real quickly, is the J silent in JADC2, or are you working with your other service counterparts?
We're all just doing our own thing. No. No, I work very closely with Luke Cropsey and Mark Kitts from my Army and Air Force, and we also work very closely, honestly, with OSD on this. So I think it's weirdly a very small, tight team. You'd think it'd be kind of huge, but it actually is a pretty small, tight team as we try and really figure out these use cases, and that's really what you want, is what are the use cases, and then how do you kind of single up around those use cases.
Right, thank you.
And naval, too.
And naval,
Marine
no,
Corps.
absolutely, and the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so Steve, and the Marine Corps. Shifting to the Marine Corps, Lieutenant General Cederholm touched on force design yesterday or the day before in his remarks. Can you just provide an update on the Marine Corps' progress transitioning to force design, and specifically highlight MARCOR Syscom PO Land Systems' role in terms of delivering that capability?
Yeah, thanks. And I wasn't able to hear his remarks, but you said force design, and a couple years ago it was Force Design 2030. That moniker's gone, and we don't even talk about Davidson window anymore because that's like too far away, right? So the Commandant provides guidance to each of the Deputy Commandants, and I've had a chance to look at some of the guidance he provided to Syscom, and it really talks about less interest in programs of record, more interest in delivery of capability in very much different ways. Don't necessarily have to deliver something to the entire Marine Corps at once. Let's get something out to the relevant unit who's in the WES, right? And then we'll scale later. Don't necessarily build or start thinking that you have to build a program of record, right? How can we better develop a prototype so that it can easily transition to a program of record when you get the funding and the ability to scale? One thing that I get a little concerned with is we got the countdown clock, and okay, we're ready for January 1st. So what happens if nothing happens after January 1st, 2027? Years go by, we've got a lot of prototypes out there. How are we going to sustain them, and have we made those kind of investments? On the readiness piece, I really liked Admiral Cheby's remarks. The ground side of the Marine Corps has not had the benefit of a naval aviation enterprise type approach, of a performance to plan mindset. We're getting after that right now. And the Marine Corps is seriously considering a ground system enterprise that is very much using fault tree analysis, driver trees, these kind of things to get at what are the readiness North Stars that we need. How many ACV platoons do I need to support a 3.0 MU presence full time? The Syscom is having to do a lot of very agile things, to meet the Commandant's requirements. We've got great partnerships, and the fact that down in Quantico, I'm literally a stone's throw away from the requirements, from General Austin. I've got the commander of Training and Education Command down there. So we are, by proximity, have very short lines of communication, very effective lines of communication. And we have a great drumbeat on how we're getting after these force design priorities. And there's some new ones there, of course. There was a great divestment. It's done. We're now looking at things like contested logistics, littoral mobility. I'm not going to speak to I'm out of my lane a little bit on the number of ships and littoral maneuver bridging solutions, landing ship medium, all those kind of things that NAVSEA is working so hard on, but that's a big part of the organic mobility. But also things like long-range fires with Nemesis, which we've just fielded a platoon of Nemesis-capable units this year. Again, great speed. So we're getting into spaces the Marine Corps hasn't been in years, and we've got to make sure we not only deliver to the fleet a capability, but that we deliver to the fight. Two different things. It's not just a handoff here, it's now this continuous feedback loop. So that's how we're kind of getting after the force design efforts.
Well said. Now, you said it was a little bit out of your lane to talk about ships. You'll be the first Marine that thought it was out of his lane to talk about numbers of ships.
I hope I don't hear about that later. It is 31 ships, 31 amphibs,
That hasn't
big decks
changed in
and
my
LPDs.
lifetime.
Okay. Yep.
So each of you have described your challenges, what you're working on, and as Chris said earlier, you don't go it alone. The government doesn't manufacture ships, aircraft, landing vehicles. It doesn't create large language models. We rely on a highly skilled defense industry, traditional and increasingly non-traditional, to produce, maintain, and modernize our platforms and weapon systems. So take a moment, please, and just talk about the trends that you're seeing in industry today in terms of innovation, capability, capacity, and how are the SysComs providing lead turn for industry to ensure that they're working on the things that are important to you, that are important to the warfighter, and that everybody's in lockstep in terms of the speed of developing and delivering that capability. Carl, let's start with you.
You said in the green room that we could answer any question we wanted, so I'll kind of answer your question. And many of you have heard this, firsthand from me. My fear is as industry comes with new solution sets, new way of looking at the problem, the NAVAIR organization will not be set up for success. I'll give you an example. We're moving forward with a new platform called the EC-130, the replacement to the E-6. It just went on contract with Northrop Grumman. I am calling together a meeting with the PEO, the PMA, Northrop Grumman, my chief engineer, my chief tester, my chief readiness officer, to make sure we leverage the best practices that industry can bring forward and not artificially hinder or handcuff industry from doing what they have learned through other programs here. That is a challenge that we face. The team does great work each and every single day. They know how to do something. To teach the organization how to do something differently, that is a challenge for us. So to industry, and you all have done this, when you come in and talk to me, at the end of those conversations, there's usually 3 questions asked. What are my opportunities? What are my blind spots? And what would you do if you were me? We need your ideas coming at us. A lot of you engage with me, whether it's at these forums or in my office. Please continue to bring the ideas, and then bring us the barriers that you see from your perspective for us to develop, integrate, test, and field the next generation of capability.
I heard open door.
Open door.
Steve?
Yeah, thanks very much. So kind of, the Marine Corps, we buy in quantities that are often not sufficient to attract new kind of vendors. So we work a lot with the Army on the ground vehicle side. Electronic side, we've got some very great primes. One thing I'm really driving is intellectual property. And this, it's in the contract, it's not what'd you do, what'd you not do. We've got to solve that problem. Also, open standards. I think open standards is sometimes interpreted, MOSA as, well, I have a standard with my company, and I'm certainly open to others using it or considering it. We truly need, and there was some recent guidance published on MOSA standards, but we really got to get industry to adopt the widest, most open kind of standard there, because the platforms we're fielding today, they're going to be changing, that we're going to be hanging new things on them, injecting new software, and they've got to be able to be updated very rapidly. So the platform versus, the hardware versus software piece. I often get frustrated by what seems like industry's inability to respond promptly to RFPs and this kind of thing. And so when I talked to them about that, it was, well, if we had a decent draft statement of work, we could get after that sooner. So we're starting at the Syscom, starting some what we call reverse industry days, so we can get that feedback. And certainly I, with my primes as a PEO, have constantly engaged in how we're going to get after things. And also, I definitely need their cooperation in looking down their supply chains, into their sub-tiers, and helping us with supply chain risk management, risk assessment. In addition to threats from foreign ownership, whatever, it's also what's the most fragile, what's the most critical mom and pop place that might go out of business because I produce small quantities. So I've got to identify alternative sources.
Thank you. If I could offer one observation, you can get industry to help you draft up a statement of work also. Yeah. That kind of saves a step, saves time. Yeah. Seiko?
Okay, I have 3 thoughts on this. I think for a really long time, the government kind of prided themselves on innovation. We have the DARPAs of the world, the ONRs, we have labs, and they did fantastic work, and they were, technologists and all this. And I think over the last few years, we've kind of seen this shift where industry has just been just like a step function, just have jumped in innovation, in my opinion. And I think, just from a mindset, we as the government have to figure out how to be more adopters. We got to be better at adopting that innovative technology. We have to get out of wanting to make the widget, which sometimes we just get enamored with. And I think we've got to be more about, okay, there is this thing, how do we adopt it better? That does mean that we have to be better at really being connected to the problem, to the warfighting problem. So, that's number one, and that's really on us as far as trends go and how I'm seeing that happen. For industry, for the love of God, simplicity over complexity. I mean, complexity is going to kill us, especially in my world. And so the simpler we can make those systems, the more usable, the more intuitive those systems are, so that we can really work on the training piece and make that easy for the operators, reliable, maintainable in the WES. Something is so critically important. I know you have something that you've made, but if that thing isn't intuitive, and it's going to require some long, training pipeline, it's going to be hard for us. And then the third thing is you will probably have better insight into sometimes connecting the dots than we do. I told you before that, we're in these silos, and those silos are blurring. You're seeing that. You have actually a better advantage of seeing that than we do. If you see an RFP and that RFP is for this specific thing, and you're kind of like, honestly, we could actually open the aperture and we could do something bigger than that, especially, like I said, in the systems world. You have to let us know, at least let me know, right? Hey, you wanted us to do this one little thing. We can actually do a lot more for you. So those would be my asks.
Thanks, Soko. And in case you weren't counting, that's another open door I heard. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, we have an open door too, sir. I would offer a couple things. The first thing I would say is we are trying to generate what we consider is our core value measures or our metrics that we all need to get aligned around. One of the things I've struggled with at NAVSEA is really getting the ground truth of what the data is. And we're going to share this with industry, we're going to share it with a lot of people, and so we want everybody to be oriented around what we care about. And it's going to be like 11 measures that we are going to start holding ourselves accountable to, things like on-time delivery, quality, retention. And so I would encourage you, understand what those are and then understand how they translate, because that is how we are trying to get everybody in this massive organization called NAVSEA aligned. And it's a best practice that I've taken from some industry folks. The second thing is we are going to try to increase what I call the whole of NAVSEA engagements. NAFC's big, got lots of PEOs, lots of warfare centers. Everybody can usually find whatever answer they want somewhere in this enterprise. And so Admiral Downey and I are going to start trying to figure out how to have the right level of engagement, in a routine basis with industry and with other people. So you hear it straight from the leadership about, no kidding, this is what we're focused on, this is what our priorities are, because it's important that we're all aligned and we're focused on the right thing. And then the last piece I would offer is, I am trying to get as creative as I possibly can on contracts, whether that's OTAs in production, whether that's grand challenges, whether that's other innovative thing. I am opening the aperture. We have got to get more capable in this area and use every tool we have, right? We have got to be open-minded. There is not a single solution, but we've got to understand all the tools in our toolbox and then figure out how to use those to make things move. We've got to get faster. At the end of the day, if you think about 701 days, it takes us that long to award some contracts, and that's incredible. We've got to figure out how to get more urgency and take advantage of some of those tools that are available.
All right, thank you. Hey, last question. It's going to be a quick one. So go ahead and start lining up at mics with your questions. You've each been working for several decades on this next question, so I'll give you several seconds to answer it. If you were king or queen for a day, what changes would you make in terms of authorities, regulatory processes, policy, organization, so that you can deliver your capability to the warfighter faster, better, cheaper? Let's go ahead and start with you, Carl.
You're not going to like my answer, so I'll just... A foundational aspect of why we've been successful on getting availability, readiness of the naval aviation enterprise to where it's at right now is we didn't answer that question. We took the time to understand where we were trying to go, and then we took the time, more time, to baseline our current performance. We went out to industry to get their perspective. We looked at what best in class was, and then we put a plan together to execute to close that gap. So if I were king for a day, I'd spend 23 hours defining what the problem is we're trying to solve. Because when anybody says you got to fix the acquisition process, there's no value to that problem statement. How do we get capability out there faster at an affordable cost? What's keeping us from doing that today? And there's multiple different reasons. What levers can we pull? And then how are we going to measure our performance to plan? So that's what I would do.
I love that answer. Steve?
Thanks. I've been reading a lot of studies and analysis from the Commission on PPP Reform, recent Bloomberg report. I've read Atlantic Council report, all talked about expanding the role of the PEO. And as a PEO, what brought that to my mind was, we need a Rickover, we need a Wayne Myers. I mean, maybe that's one way, if you could be king for a day, to see if that model would again work, because it certainly proved very successful in the past and delivered capability at breakneck speed that has paid huge dividends. So that's kind of big picture. Short picture, I think sustained, adequate, predictable funding would be like a treasure to have. So, two things.
Seiko.
Get rid of CRs, number one. I think, to Steve's point, adjusting the PPB process where you can actually have in-year execution dollars to do rapid innovation. For the love of God, just the 2 years that it takes to palm something is not helpful. Certainly, I think you've got creative program managers, but we have got to get after that from a system perspective. And I would also say, take a look at how we're incentivizing program managers. Are we incentivizing program managers to do what we've asked them to do? So if there are programs that they well know are just not useful anymore, that capability is out of date, but they're still funding it, and we still have massive maintenance communities that are using this, let's incentivize them to divest in those capabilities, and then they get to keep the money. They get to keep the money and reinvest it in something, something relevant. So I think we do need to relook at how we're incentivizing our talent to make sure that we're actually rowing in the same direction.
All right, thanks. Chris?
Hey, I'll take it a different way. I would say if I were king for the day, I would want to try to figure out how to help the industrial base. How do I make it better for you to invest your capital in your facilities? How do I get you to spend more money on R&D? What can I do to help you with your workforce? right? That there are some authorities in those areas that I think we could mutually agree on and could go help you get better at your end of the equation. Yeah, you heard a lot of other stuff about, yeah, if our King Fred Dad want to change inside of the government, but I think my thing right now is I got to figure out how to help industry. And I haven't been asking and I'm looking for ideas because I think there are things that are holding you back. Because I want to get back to the day where our shipyards are actually doing commercial work and government work. I want to start figuring out why we can't, get more investment on the industry side to help us solve some of our problems.
Excellent. All great answers. Read Freedom's Forge. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to the audience. Let's start on the right-hand side, gentlemen.
Kai Alberg, U.S. Naval Institute. We've seen amazing advances in networking and communications in recent years. But thinking about adaptability and survivability, we have to think what happens when China takes out critical satellites with kinetic means or EMPs, and what happens when our communications and networking is disrupted with cyber attacks or just good old-fashioned jamming. Be interested in the panel's views on where we are in preparing and training for such a scenario, and what additional capabilities you would like to see by 2027 to successfully fight in such an environment.
Seiko, why don't you jump on that one?
Yeah, that's all you, Seiko.
I mean, I think advances in Starlink have been fantastic. P-LEO and those sorts of capabilities. Kuiper's coming next with from Amazon. I mean, there's a whole bunch of capabilities that you're talking tens of thousands of satellites up there, right? And so that resilience is kind of inherent in that. So I think you're seeing kind of the commercial industry moving at light speed in this area, and then we are just taking advantage of that really fast, and I think that provides the resilience that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I'll just add from the Marine Corps perspective, spending a lot of time in the WES, if you will, as a stand-in force, as a joint enabler. We are experiencing and practicing and exercising a lot in what we call DDIL environments, and actually the amount of commercial technology that is almost on a 6-month basis becoming available, we have to keep pace with that, but we're finding a lot of opportunities there to be able to maintain command and control despite the MCON or despite the EW profiles of our adversary.
To this side.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. Appreciate your awareness of what the problems are in this whole process of getting after rapid innovations through the acquisition process. I'm Ed Leopold from Persistent Systems. So to answer that gentleman's question and to augment Admiral Okano's answer, so mobile ad hoc networking is what will supplant or augment like depletion of satellites in DDIL environments. And so we're working to help and support all the exercises around the world, Valiant Shield, Silent Swarm, BALTOPS, REPMIS, etc. What I want to know from the panel, from everyone on the panel is how are you going to aggregate the data and the results from these exercises to actually move forward rapidly and smartly through acquisition?
Me? Look, I think you're finding that we're behind on that, right? This is something where we need to improve that learning. And what we're finding is we're learning in an area, whether we're learning in that complete, in that exercise, but we're not necessarily as an enterprise learning from those lessons. And so I think you raise a good point of, how are we going to get better aggregating that data, really learning from that, and then sharing it across the board, to folks so that we just kind of, all level up. We got to work on that.
Well, let me ask, and you jump on this too. Every one of you hit on data, criticality of data, you're dealing with masses of data. We haven't talked AI yet. How are you exploring the opportunity that AI brings to your tool set in terms of being able to manage the masses of data that you have to push through your systems?
I'm going to once again not answer your question, but answer a different question if I could. I'll get to your question. I think if you watched Admiral Cooper this morning, I did not get to see it. But what I've had over the last couple of years here, especially as we've been in the Red Sea in a weapons engagement zone with the carrier strike groups, we've had direct communications with the fleet commanders. And the data we're receiving back from those air wings on current operations, and then the closed loop system that we've implemented so we can understand what they're seeing and quickly get them back answers to their questions or improved capability has been foundational to our success. It was ad hoc at first. I think we're formalizing it now, and I think it's a tremendous way for us to leverage. You talked about data from all these exercises. The best exercise we have right now is what's going on in the Red Sea. How do we leverage that data and get it right back into our programs of record quickly and get the capability back out there? And we're doing that today. So I think there's more opportunities there, but I think we're on a good path. From an AI perspective, my 17-year-old daughter introduced me to ChatGPT a couple weeks ago. I'll answer it the same way I answered the earlier question. There's new technology coming down, and we have a lot of folks who have thought about the problem in one way for a long time. Help us think about the problem in a different way. We're using AI today in our modeling and sim environments. In the joint simulation environment where we have F-35s, F-22s, F-18s, and the high-end fight fully informed. But AI-generated red air to give them a dynamic environment which they have never, ever seen before. And I think that's one of probably 1,000 different applications of AI. I'll hand it over to Seiko or to Steve.
Yeah, if I may, that's really that's graduate level, right? Using generating red air. So what we're looking at the Syscom and the PO is I'm just really trying to reduce procurement administrative lead time, and so huge opportunities in the contracts world, and they're very our contracts lead is very open to this. There's tools out there already, so we're making very aggressive use of that, just to reduce the time it takes to either issue an RFP or to evaluate a source is sought, this kind of thing. I mean, from really weeks to minutes in terms of getting an initial assessment of what all the feedback is and where we can go from there. Also using it in terms of our tailored acquisition documentation. So it used to be, hey, let's write an acquisition strategy. A couple weeks go by, where's the strategy? Well, 90% of it's templated, right? And so those are just system descriptions, what's all the boilerplate from various documents. So I want to spend time on what is the strategy going to be, right? Not on what the document looks like. So we're applying that so we can start generating acquisition strategies quickly so we can get to, let's really talk about the strategy's impact. So I think there's really high-end uses of AI, and for us, we got to get our data right first. I've asked informally DAU, do you have copies of all the, in the defense acquisition virtual environment of all these acquisition strategies? Why don't you build an AI large language model that we can just put into and then quickly get stuff back, because they've got all the good ones and they've got all the bad ones as well. So we got to make sure our data is ready to do that. And I think we actually in the RDAIS actually have a source for that. So some work we got to do internal, but again, high-end use, that's great. I'm really just focused on getting the culture to understand its capabilities, reducing their lead time so they can actually be critical thinkers and add value in that regard, vice just doing documentation.
So I will say in the AI realm, we're moving out at speed. I think this is probably one of the areas that we've been the most aggressive in. Readiness is a great place to start because it's data that's accessible. There's a lot of it that's out there. So we're seeing a lot of effort in the readiness arena. I can tell you one of my program offices they have deployed, I want to say 20 chat ITs. It's like ChatGPT, but it's for canes and AD&S. And so essentially on the ship, the sailors type in, it's sucked in all the tech manuals and everything, and they type in a question and it answers it for them. And so having that, being deployed on, like I said, 20 ships and then going to hundreds in the next few months is exactly what we've got to do in order to increase readiness on the ships. But the way that I would kind of also look at how we're using AI is, if you think about kind of the tactical, operational, and strategic levels, and then planning, execution, and regeneration, there's certain tools you can use in different areas. Certainly in the regeneration or the readiness piece, that's kind of, to me, where you would start. The planning piece is another area that we're really focusing on to really understand and have AI look at courses of action. And if we did this, how would this work? I see a lot of efforts in that area, and then certainly in the execution piece, there's some efforts there. But I think that's where I see the trends happening, but a huge push in AI in all areas.
Chris, short and sweet.
Hey, short and sweet, I would say AI good, need more. I'm just kidding. What I would tell everybody is understand what problem we're trying to solve. Get to the workforce, get to the shipyard, go talk to the people. Yes, there's technology, but until you really go walk in their shoes and listen to them and see the problems they're dealing with, AI may or may not solve that problem, right? And so I would just encourage you all, there's a lot of things we can do, but get to the deck plate, get to the waterfront, go talk to our people. There is a lot of opportunity here, but understand what problem we're trying to solve.
Excellent. Come back to starboard. Mike, I have my man.
Is this on? Hey. So a couple years ago at the SNA Symposium, Admiral Khanna was on a panel where she and the panel focused on transitioning new ships into the fleet and the fact that we've got to get this right and we got to speed it up. I read recently, and I may be wrong about this, but I read recently that Jack Lucas will not be ready to deploy until 2027. That's 4 years after commissioning. Zumwalt's down in Pascagoula right now getting the conventional prop strike capability. How long is that ship going to take before she's ready to deploy? Both of those are game-changing capabilities we need on 1 January 2027. Can't we speed this process up? Are we in business as usual?
So I can talk to 125. I think 1,000 is going to be, we're doing a good job there, and we can talk offline. On 125, what I would tell you is we actually stepped back. The original plan was to really just focus on 125 and do our normal thing, which is just throw resources, throw people, get it through the test regime. What we actually did was we stepped back and we said, what we really need to do is maximize Flight 3 capability in that window. And so, yes, we're slowing 125 down, but we're slowing it down so I can make sure the following ships are all going to be on the same baseline so that we have maximum combat capability when we think we need it. I can get into more details about sort of what's happening there, but it is not business as usual on 125 in the Flight 3 class because we all recognize how important that Spice 6 plus some of the advanced EW capabilities are. And so we've really thought, I think, differently, and it's not just about one ship, it's about bringing the class of ships online as quickly as possible.
Good question, Mike. Portside.
Danielle Matz, Areas Consulting, a woman-owned small business. Some of this is, I would say, start with a statement. It kind of goes to what Mr. Miller was talking about with the industrial base. And this may be a little dated, but about 65% of the Navy's budget goes to 12 vendors. So as we try to increase the industrial base, particularly for small businesses, currently, particularly in NAVSEA at the warfare centers, there's a push that all contracts have to come out of Seaport, which is a single NAICS code, and oftentimes the work is not tied to that NAICS code in reality. As a small business, we are assessed by the SBA based on our NAICS code. And so that becomes this kind of constant conflict of and a roadblock for us to being able to get in and contract with the Navy and offer our services because of the way that contract vehicle is set up. So my question would be, how do you foresee opening that aperture? I know there's some moves to doing like OTAs and things like that, but that just becomes another hurdle of paperwork as a small business that you're trying to get through to even see what the work is to get to that work. So that would be my question.
Chris, I think she was staring right at you.
Yes, sir. I guess let's talk. I mean, one of the things I think my job is to remove barriers. And if there are barriers in things like Seaport that you think are limiting your potential or not value added, I'm the tool. And so I've already done this a few times with some of our industry partners since I've been at NAVSEA to get everybody in a room and let's talk through it. You're right. There is not a single thing here, but I want to learn more. I want to understand because I'm just trying to be a learning organization, right? Just trying to get a little better every day. And if we're missing something and there's something we should change, I'm all in.
Carl, anything to add?
No, I think you got between Chris and you got John Pope right here and you got Tom Radowski, the three executive directors and the big syscoms. They're leading what's going on with small business. So I think those are perfect points of contact to go reach out to.
Mo, you have the floor.
Okay. To Mr. Miller, you want to get from 65% to 80%. What's your target date? And how are you going to hold your folks and industry accountable for meeting those dates? I mean, industry responds to penalties and they know how to get to dates. But if you don't hold people accountable, you can say we want to and we got great aspirational goals, but unless you put a stake in the ground and say we will, and these are the penalties, if we don't, you don't get there. Do you have a target date for getting there?
Yes. Let me just back up a second. So I was in a shipyard yesterday, and they were going over their portfolio, and they told me every one of their ships was on time. So I go walk on the waterfront, I start talking to the project soup, and I started asking the same question. And I said, well, how can you be on time after all the issues you just explained to me? Oh, we keep re-baselining. So I'm like, well, who sets on time? He's like, I don't know, we just follow the contract. And so these are the kind of things I'm trying to get at. On time is set by our customer. In my world, right now, that's largely what we set in our initial contract award for on our ship repair side. So I'm trying to get everybody to at least understand what do I mean by being on time. It's incredible to me that we have this kind of like talking past one another that we got to get after. Now, here's the challenge with what you're going after. You know, we always have a number of avails any given time underway. I am just every year trying to move that needle up. So we can walk through what that looks like, but it goes by avail by avail by avail that we are. Now, the other part of your thing, Christina Koval's here somewhere. She's actually the contracting officer for me in this area. Yes, we are going to start incentivizing on-time completion and schedules. Because to your point, I have to change the incentive structure to align with what we're getting after. But I will also be the first to tell you, government's part of this problem, right? And I know you're going to bring up new work or growth work or something like that, and I understand we are part of that problem, and that's what we are also talking about is how do I get better? Because that's why Carnival's good, right? Carnival doesn't change the work package. They know exactly what they're going to get done. They'll push things to another window, and so we have to get better on the government side, but absolutely, we got to get better about how we incentivize the structure to make sure everybody has the same sight picture.
And yes, Carnival is having a major issue with their availability, and they brought in a former 3-star submariner, Billy Burke,
but we
and
met
turned
with,
it around. 78 Naval Academy grad, just saying.
All right, I think we've exhausted the audience questions, and it's time for a wrap-up. I'm going to ask just a quick wrap-up question. What keeps you awake at night? Or maybe you want to answer what lets you sleep well at night. Carl, let's start with you.
You know, I'm, I don't know, 150 or so days before I transition out of my job and go on to my next adventure here. Extremely proud of the accomplishments the entire NAE and NAVAIR team have had over the last couple of years here. I would characterize them as we are on a great vector with a lot of momentum. We have the next generation leaders that are coming in behind us, and I think they'll continue the progress we've made. I know the CNO and the VCNO will mandate that. As I leave, look, I'm pretty passionate about this. I mean, our sons and daughters are deployed around the world today, employing the capabilities that we field. It is our commitment, it is our collective commitment, government and industry, to make sure that they have the capability they need to execute their mission successfully and return home safely. So our opportunity, what lets me sleep at night, I think we have a good team on the field driving towards outcomes. Please do not lose momentum.
Yeah, I'd like to quote General Mattis and say, I keep people up at night. They're worried about what I'm going to do. I'm not worried about what they're going to do. But truly, I sleep very well at night, and it's because we have such a fantastic team at the SysCom and within the PEO. I often have to tell folks like, no, you do have a work-life balance. Please, not 24/7. So they're so dedicated to the mission. They're always getting after feedback from the fleet. I just always want to also understand what are the risks we're taking by going real fast, and make sure that I don't have wholesale obsolescence, on January 2nd, 2027 or whatever, when we've just fielded everything and not always considered our MLPF. So that would be the one thing that before my head hits the pillow, I said, have we got the training right? Have I got at least a logistics sustainment train set up? And how am I going to refresh it? When I'm threat informed, how am I going to get it updated quickly? So when the Marine or the sailor, pushes the button, the missile leaves the rail or the round leaves the barrel.
Well said. Seiko.
Timeline. I think timeline keeps me up at night. In how fast this is coming. But I will say that we have the best talent in the world. I saw Kevin White in the audience. I don't know if he's still in the audience. Oh, hey, Kevin. This is the talent we're talking about. I mean, Kevin White on Abe Lincoln basically, figured out how to increase the quality of life of all the sailors, all 5,000 sailors on his ship within months. And it's just the talent like that, the innovation that, is what I know gives me confidence that we're gonna crush it.
Bring it home, Chris.
What keeps me up at night, and I've actually had a bunch of people ask me this lately, thing one right now that keeps me up at night is our wartime readiness. We think about where we are today, but think about it when it really gets into conflict about what it's done to our industrial base. Red Sea is a great opportunity. We are learning a lot, but it's stressing the system. And I encourage folks, right, you really got to be thinking through this because it will impact everything we do if you really have to get into a full wartime footing. And I don't know right now if we have the capacity and the reserve and everything that we need. And so that's where I'm spending a lot of my time is making sure that we're always ready because we're not going to have 18 months. We're not going to have 2 years to be able to build that machine. And so we all need to be thinking about what do we need to start doing today? Every second counts. What do we need to start doing today to make sure that we're ready? But like you heard, what inspires me, what motivates me is just the amazing people that work at NAVSEA. Whether it's a engineer at a warfare center or one of our contracting officers, they're committed, they're passionate, they figure stuff out. And so I think that is truly the game changer for us is our people and our ability to solve problems. But we all just got to be honest with ourselves about how ready are we and what do we need to do to be able to go fight and win.
All right, thank you. A round of applause for our panelists here.
Thank you very much, sir. And if I could all ask you to just indulge me for a couple of minutes before we formally thank our panel, I would really appreciate it. First, a huge thank you to our sponsor, McKinsey & Company, for this morning's presentation. Also, Admiral Spicer has asked me to confirm to you that all the presentations, to include Admiral Cooper's, will be made available to you. We still have 45 minutes left on the exhibit floor, so please take advantage of the final networking time with West 2025 and make sure to stop by and see those last few booths that you haven't visited yet. I would like to thank all of the companies who supported West 2025 as sponsors and exhibitors. This event cannot happen without their support. We know you have a lot of options on conferences, and AFCEA and the Naval Institute appreciate you coming to San Diego to support West. Again, the biggest and best so far for 2025. As you saw throughout the week, this year's program was amazing. We expanded the number of stages and sessions to gain more discussion opportunities on crucial subjects pertaining to national security and defense. I'd like to thank all of the speakers. We had over 150 speakers and other program participants who took time from their very busy schedules to be with us this week. Also, thank you everyone who attended the 35th West. We look forward to many more years of partnerships between AFCEA and the Naval Institute to bring you West here in San Diego. Please take time to give us your feedback. Hopefully this year you saw a lot of the input you gave us last year so that we can continue to make this your best conference as we go forward. So with that, sir, Secretary Stackley and panel members, thank you for taking the time being with us today. And I would like to present you all with a token of appreciation from AFCEA International and the Naval Institute for joining us here. A Naval Institute press book, China's New Navy by Shi Bang Li. Thank you very much. And thank you all.